In this presentation, we are going to discuss American literary naturalism, which I like to call the child of realism, in large part because naturalism emerges from the realist movement. The text that we will be using in our exploration of this literary genre is Maggie, a Girl of the Streets by Stephen Crane. A man said to the universe, "Sir, I exist." "However," replied the universe, "the fact has not created in me a sense of obligation." Stephen Crane. This imagined conversation, first credited to Stephen Crane in 1894, captures the essence of the naturalist ideology. An offshoot of realism, naturalism sought to portray life exactly as it was, but with a twist. Where realist writers emphasized the idea that people have the opportunity to make moral choices, or not, naturalist stories posit a vision of the world as a Darwinian struggle for survival. And I'm not just being poetic here. The idea of social Darwinism, coined by philosopher/biologist/anthropologist/sociologist named Herbert Spencer, pictured here, applied Darwin's theory of evolutionary biology to human existence. That is, the idea of survival of the fittest, which emerged in the 1870s and remained popular until the end of World War II. Viewing the world in this way meant that naturalists imagined the world as a place in which it's man versus nature in every sense. In other words, people are at the mercy of their environment and their genes. That's genes with a G. In the world of naturalism, there is no such thing as divine intervention or freedom of choice. There's just inescapable fate. Features of naturalism include determinism. So we've already talked about how in realist texts there's this idea of free will. In naturalist texts, the idea that individual characters have a direct influence on the course of their lives is completely supplanted by a focus on nature or fate. So naturalism views humans as living in a natural environment, just like animals. So they can act in response to exterior forces like poverty or the environment, and interior forces like disease, human urges like sexual desire, greed, and so on. But ultimately, they are helpless before these forces. Often, a naturalist author will lead the reader to believe that a character's fate has already been predetermined, usually by hereditary and environmental factors, and suggest that the destiny of humanity is misery in life and oblivion in death, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it. Yeah, so naturalism is not a place you turn to for, an uplift. Another feature of naturalism is objectivism. So just like realism, naturalism is really interested in an objective portrayal of the world. And finally, naturalism is often very pessimistic. So frequently we will have one or more characters in a naturalist text that continues to repeat a line or phrase that tends to have a very pessimistic connotation, sometimes emphasizing the inevitability of death. Naturalistic works often include uncouth or sordid subject matter. For example, Stephen Crane's Maggie deals very frankly with poverty, prostitution, and sex in a way that exudes a pervasive pessimism. So Stephen Crane. Stephen Crane was one of America's foremost realist writers, and his works have been credited with marking the beginning of modern American naturalism. Some will argue that title should go to Rebecca Harding Davis, who wrote Life in the Iron Mills, but we're not going to have that debate right now. Anyway, so Stephen Crane was active as a writer for a fairly short time. He died very young. But his writing career really kind of begins in 1891. This is the year that he dropped out of Syracuse University because he decided that humanity was more interesting than school books. And he went to work full-time as a reporter with his brother for the New York Tribune. In New York, he lived a bohemian existence among the local artists and became well acquainted with life in the Bowery district, which is where Maggie, a Girl of the Streets is set. From his firsthand knowledge of poverty during this period, he was able to realistically depict tenement life in his writings. In 1893, Crane privately published his first novella, Maggie, a Girl of the Streets, under a pseudonym after several publishers rejected the work on the grounds that his description of slum realities would be too shocking to middle-class readers. According to Crane, Maggie tries to show that environment is a tremendous thing in the world and frequently shapes lives regardless. Critics suggest that the novel was a major development in American literary naturalism, and that it introduced Crane's vision of life as warfare. Influenced by the Darwinism of the times, Crane viewed individuals as victims of purposeless forces and believed that they encountered only hostility in their relationships with other individuals, with society, with nature, and with God. Also prominent in his first novel is an ironic technique that exposes the hypocrisy of moral tenets when they are set against the sordid reality of slum life. Although Maggie received the support of literary figures such as Hamlin Garland and William Dean Howells, ultimately it was a flop. It was not until 1896, after Crane tempered the brutalities in a second edition, that the work received wide recognition, and this is the version that we're reading for this class. Crane's second novel, The Red Badge of Courage, won him international fame. His vision of life as warfare is uniquely rendered in this short, essentially plotless novel. The Red Badge of Courage is a series of vivid episodes in which a young soldier named Henry Fleming confronts a gamut of emotions, fear, courage, pride, and humility, in his attempt to understand his battlefield experiences. In this respect, Fleming represents the everyman of war. Crane's work employs a narrative point of view that distinctly offers both an objective panorama of the war as well as the more subjective impressions of the young soldier. Since he had never been to war when he wrote The Red Badge of Courage, Crane claimed that his source for the accurate descriptions of combat was actually the football field. When he finally experienced battle as a war correspondent, he said of the novel, it was all right. So even though we're not reading it this term, it's worth mentioning that critics have long debated over whether or not The Red Badge of Courage should be considered a product of realism or naturalism. Proponents of realism view the novel as the first unromanticized account of the Civil War and find that the protagonist's maturation from an unexperienced youth to an enlightened, battle-worn soldier is truthfully depicted. On the other hand, defenders of a naturalist reading contend that the youth's actions and experiences are shaped by social, biological, and psychological forces, and that his, quote, development as a character is incidental to Crane's expert depiction of how these forces determine human existence. I highlight this critical debate because it is one we ourselves will stage when we read Kate Chopin's The Awakening, which can be either a realist or naturalist text depending on how you view the primary character. As I said before, Crane died young. By 1900, he had developed tuberculosis, and he died tragically at the age of 28. His artistry lies in his ability to convey a personal vision based on his own sense of integrity. In so doing, Crane pioneered a modern form of fiction which superseded the genteel realism of late 19th century American literature. And I hope you enjoy reading Maggie, a Girl of the Streets.